The story of the Knights Templar begins not with their downfall, but in shadow. Even today, centuries later, their name evokes whispers of hidden vaults, ancient manuscripts, and treasures so vast that kings themselves could scarcely imagine them. Yet for all that has been written, most of it scratches only the surface. There is a deeper truth, one that seems deliberately obscured, lurking beneath the records of chroniclers and the official histories preserved in dusty libraries. The Templars were not merely monks in armor, nor simply warriors of faith. They were architects of a secret empire, an intricate network that stretched across continents, threading together wealth, influence, and knowledge in ways that the medieval world, and perhaps even a modern one, has yet to fully grasp. Imagine a world where the greatest powers of the age, the kings of France, the Pope in Rome, and the merchants of Venice, were all unaware that a single order of men, bound by vows of poverty and obedience, wielded influence over riches beyond measure. This was the paradox of the Templars, outwardly humble, inwardly omnipotent. Pilgrims crossing the dangerous roads to Jerusalem felt only the reassurance of their protection, never the vast machinery of commerce, banking, and intelligence operating quietly behind the scenes. Castles, farms, and fortified preceptories dotted Europe and the Holy Land, but they were more than military strongholds. They were nodes in a global network designed to collect, protect, and move wealth in a way that was unprecedented. Stories of their riches begin in the simplest of forms: coins, land, and donations from grateful kings and nobles. But these small gifts were merely the seeds of a system that would grow far beyond their modest origins. The Templars devised methods to store and transfer wealth that seemed almost magical to the people of their time. Letters of credit allowed pilgrims to travel without carrying gold. Estates produced revenue streams that flowed unseen into the order's coffers. What may have begun as a practical necessity evolved into a sophisticated financial empire, one capable of challenging even the mightiest rulers of Europe. And yet, for all this wealth, there remains almost no trace of it today, only fragments, rumors, and tantalizing hints scattered across centuries of speculation. It is here, in the tension between what is known and what is hidden, that the true allure of the Templars emerges. There are tales of lost treasures buried deep within secret vaults, of sacred relics moved under the cover of night, of knowledge so potent that it had to be concealed to survive. Some speak of maps coded in symbols that only the initiated could read, of manuscripts that contain the keys to understanding not only the Templars' wealth, but perhaps the very nature of power itself. And all of this, the wealth, the knowledge, the influence, was assembled in such a way that even the most determined attempts to destroy the order could never fully erase its imprint. The mystery is compounded by the deliberate suppression of their history. When King Philip IV of France moved against the order in 1307, the world witnessed the arrest of knights, the confiscation of assets, and the orchestrated dissolution of a powerful organization. Chroniclers were silenced, records disappeared, and much of the narrative was rewritten to suit those in power. But suppression cannot fully erase truth. Even in shadows, clues remain. Cryptic symbols carved into stone, hidden tunnels beneath preceptories, and the whispers of secret societies claiming lineage to the Templars. As we embark on this journey, imagine walking the corridors of abandoned castles where their banners once flew, tracing the footprints of men whose influence shaped continents, yet vanished almost overnight from the official record. Picture the quiet, dark rooms where treasure may still lie hidden, untouched for centuries, waiting for eyes capable of seeing the patterns left behind. There is a reason their story continues to captivate historians, conspiracy theorists, and treasure hunters alike. It is not merely the promise of gold, nor the thrill of secret knowledge. It is the audacity of a medieval order that achieved what no other could, to wield power across the known world while remaining shrouded in mystery. The tale of the Templars is a paradox of light and shadow. Their public life was one of piety, courage, and devotion. Their private existence was one of ambition, secrecy, and an empire hidden in plain sight. And it is in this duality that we find the heart of their legacy, a hidden wealth not only of gold and land, but of knowledge, influence, and the kind of secrets that can shape history itself. To follow their path is to step into a world where what is seen is only a fraction of the truth, and what is hidden may be more powerful than any crown, any army, or any kingdom. As night falls over medieval Europe, and the last flicker of torchlight fades in Templar castles, one cannot help but wonder how much of their empire was destroyed in the fires of persecution, and how much simply disappeared into shadows, waiting for those bold enough to find it. This is not a story of simple knights, nor a tale that ends with the clang of swords. It is the story of a secret empire, the likes of which the world has never seen and may never fully understand. The roots of the Knights Templar reach back to a time of turbulence and fervent faith, when the Christian world was drawn inexorably toward the Holy Land. The First Crusade had ended in 1099 with the capture of Jerusalem, a victory that exhilarated Europe, yet left pilgrims traveling to the sacred city in constant peril. Bandits, rival factions, and treacherous terrain turned the pilgrimage into a journey of near-impossible danger. It was in this volatile world that a small group of knights emerged, men of conviction and courage who vowed to protect those who sought the holy sites. At first, their existence seemed modest, almost incidental, a handful of devoted warriors living under strict monastic rules, balancing piety with martial duty. But even in those early years, the seeds of something extraordinary were being sown. The order was founded around 1119, in the shadow of the church's vast influence, by a French knight named Hugues de Payens. He and 8 companions pledged themselves to a life of service, poverty, and chastity, answering a call that was both spiritual and practical. They were given quarters on the Temple Mount, a location of symbolic and strategic significance, built on the remnants of the ancient Temple of Solomon. From the very beginning, the choice of location suggested a purpose beyond mere protection of pilgrims, a connection to hidden knowledge, sacred geometry, and an understanding of power that transcended mere warfare. Their initial duties were simple: escort pilgrims, defend the weak, maintain discipline, but their environment and circumstances pushed them toward a vision that was far larger than anyone could have imagined. From modest beginnings, they began attracting attention, and with it, patronage. Wealthy nobles and kings saw value not only in supporting a religious order, but in investing in an organization capable of both spiritual and military might. Donations of land, money, and treasures flowed into the Templars' hands. Farms, estates, vineyards, and entire villages came under their management, scattered across Europe and the Levant. This sudden influx of resources forced the order to adapt quickly. The Templars were not merely warriors. They were becoming administrators, financiers, and custodians of wealth. Every new donation presented opportunities, challenges, and secrets. Their network began to resemble a spider's web, intricate and far-reaching, designed to endure through crises, war, and betrayal. But it was not just the accumulation of wealth that set them apart. The Templars operated under rules that combined the austere discipline of monks with the strategic cunning of seasoned generals. Their training was rigorous, both physically and intellectually. Knights were expected to understand scripture, strategy, and even elements of law and finance. This duality, devotion to God and mastery of worldly systems, created a framework in which the order could wield influence without attracting overt suspicion. In essence, the Templars were learning to operate in 2 worlds at once, the spiritual and the temporal. This would become one of their greatest strengths and one of the factors that allowed their hidden empire to flourish. Even in these early years, rumors began to swirl. Stories of secret rituals, coded messages, and cryptic symbols accompanied tales of victories and heroic deeds. Some suggested that the Templars had access to knowledge beyond what was publicly acceptable, knowledge that might explain their rapid rise and uncanny foresight. Chroniclers of the time, constrained by the Church's authority and political pressures, could record only fragments of the truth. Yet even these fragments hint at an order that was not merely reactive to the world, but profoundly proactive, shaping events in subtle, unseen ways. As the Templars expanded into the Levant, they were confronted with challenges that tested not only their martial skill, but their organizational genius. Fortresses were constructed in key locations, serving as both defensive bulwarks and hubs for administration. Roads and safe houses were established for pilgrims, but beneath these practical structures lay hidden chambers, storage vaults, and secret passages. Everything had a purpose beyond the immediate. The visible order of the Templars was a mask for a deeper, more complex system of control. Those who look at the ruins of these fortresses today may see stone and mortar, but in the medieval world, each brick was part of a greater strategy, a component of an empire built to survive, even if the order itself were destroyed. Their reputation grew, as did their mystique. Tales of valor on the battlefield were accompanied by whispers of esoteric knowledge and extraordinary privileges. Some chroniclers hinted at secret councils, mysterious oaths, and rituals conducted away from the public eye. Even within the hierarchy of the Church, the Templars were regarded with a mixture of awe and suspicion. They were bound to God, yet in many ways they operated as if answerable only to themselves. This dual loyalty to faith and to an unseen network allowed the order to expand at a pace that startled kings, clergy, and commoners alike. By the mid-12th century, the Templars had evolved from a small protective force into a sophisticated organization with political, military, and economic power that rivaled some of the largest kingdoms of Europe. Their wealth was staggering, but it was carefully managed, tracked, and concealed. Pilgrims carrying gold on the road would have no idea that the same order safeguarding them controlled vast estates across continents. Every donation, every conquest, every fortress built was a thread woven into a tapestry of influence that would endure for centuries. What began as a humble mission of protection had transformed into the foundation of a global empire, one whose true magnitude would remain hidden until the dramatic events of the 14th century. Yet even in these formative decades, the pattern is clear. The Knights Templar were not merely participants in history. They were architects of it. Their story is one of vision, strategy, and secrecy, a delicate balance of devotion and ambition, piety and power. And it is this delicate balance, perfected in their earliest years, that would make their wealth, influence, and hidden knowledge so irresistible and so dangerous to those who sought to destroy them. From their earliest days, the Knights Templar were more than warriors and monks. They were innovators of a system that would change the very fabric of medieval society. As their influence spread across Europe and the Holy Land, they began to discover the power of wealth, not merely in its possession, but in its control, movement, and concealment. The Templars were, in many ways, the architects of a financial revolution, creating methods of banking and resource management that were centuries ahead of their time. Their unique position, trusted by kings, nobles, and clergy, allowed them to operate with an authority and discretion that ordinary merchants or financiers could only dream of. At first, their financial operations were practical, almost mundane. Pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem needed safe ways to carry funds across dangerous terrain. Bandits, treacherous roads, and hostile territories made the journey perilous. The Templars devised letters of credit, early forms of checks, which allowed pilgrims to deposit gold in one location and withdraw it at another. To the average observer, this was simply a service to the faithful. But beneath the surface, it demonstrated a revolutionary understanding of trust, record-keeping, and the invisible movement of capital. The Templars were effectively creating a medieval international banking system, one that functioned under the guise of piety but held the power to influence economies across continents. As their reputation for reliability grew, so did the scope of their operations. Kings entrusted them with tax revenues. Nobles placed entire estates under their administration, and wealthy merchants sought secure storage for treasures too large or valuable to guard themselves. Farms and vineyards under Templar control generated consistent income, while castles and preceptories became centers for both commerce and intelligence. The order was no longer merely collecting wealth. It was directing it, moving it with precision, and using it to expand its influence. Some historians suggest that the Templars' financial network rivaled the treasuries of the most powerful European kingdoms, yet it remained largely invisible to the public eye. It was in the careful concealment and management of wealth that the Templars' genius truly emerges. Ledgers and records, meticulously kept, allowed the order to track resources across hundreds of miles. Gold, silver, and precious relics were stored in fortified vaults, sometimes beneath monasteries, sometimes hidden in preceptories whose design concealed chambers known only to the initiated. These assets were not merely stockpiled. They were strategically deployed to strengthen the order's position, fund military campaigns, and influence political outcomes. By controlling both the flow of money and the perception of wealth, the Templars wielded power quietly but profoundly, shaping the medieval world without ever drawing full attention to themselves. The financial sophistication of the Templars extended beyond mere storage and transfer. They understood risk, credit, and leverage in ways that modern economists would recognize. Loans were extended to kings, often at interest rates and conditions designed to ensure both repayment and influence. Estates and properties were mortgaged, bought, or sold with careful calculation, allowing the Templars to expand their holdings while maintaining liquidity. This was a system built not on force alone, but on trust, secrecy, and a keen understanding of human ambition. Those who borrowed from or entrusted their assets to the Templars often had little idea that they were participating in a network whose reach and sophistication rivaled the greatest empires of the day. Yet even as their financial empire grew, so did the rumors and suspicions surrounding it. Whispers of hidden treasure and coded ledgers circulated through courts and monasteries alike. Some suggested that the Templars possessed secret hoards, not merely of gold, but of sacred relics and manuscripts containing forbidden knowledge. Others claimed that their wealth was a tool for manipulating kings, influencing councils, and shaping the outcome of wars. Whether these whispers were entirely true is difficult to determine, but their persistence hints at an order whose power was as psychological as it was material. The Templars were not just accumulating riches. They were controlling narratives, shaping perception, and embedding their influence into the very structures of medieval society. In many ways, the financial operations of the Templars allowed them to transcend the limitations of their monastic vows. They were sworn to poverty, yet wealth flowed through their hands with unprecedented efficiency. They were bound by obedience, yet they operated across kingdoms with autonomy. They were warriors, yet they were financiers, strategists, and administrators. This convergence of roles created a paradox that was central to their power. The Templars could appear humble and devout while commanding resources and influence that rivaled the greatest monarchs. To the untrained eye, they were a religious order. To those who understood the hidden currents of power, they were a global empire operating in plain sight. The methods pioneered by the Templars would leave a lasting legacy. Their techniques for managing wealth, issuing credit, and transferring funds foreshadowed modern banking systems. And some historians argue that elements of contemporary finance have roots in the Templar model. More intriguingly, their discretion and secrecy created a blueprint for the management of hidden wealth that persists in myths and conspiracy theories to this day. The combination of financial acumen, disciplined organization, and mystical allure made them uniquely capable of surviving and thriving in an era dominated by war, faith, and political intrigue. By the end of the 12th century, the Knights Templar were no longer simply protectors of pilgrims or defenders of the Holy Land. They were custodians of a vast, largely invisible empire, their influence flowing through castles, vaults, and the ledgers of kings. Their wealth was a tool, a shield, and a symbol of power, hidden from view, but potent enough to shape the trajectory of Europe itself. This financial revolution, born of necessity and refined through centuries of cunning, would eventually make them a target as formidable as any army. Yet it also ensured that the Templars' legacy would endure, not just in legends of gold and treasure, but in the very mechanisms of power they had quietly perfected. Beyond their wealth and military might, the Knights Templar harbored secrets that few dared to acknowledge. To the casual observer, they were a devout order of warrior monks, bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Yet beneath the surface of their public lives lay a world of symbols, codes, and mysteries that hinted at knowledge far beyond the comprehension of ordinary men. From the seals they used to the rituals they performed, every aspect of the order seemed layered with hidden meaning, a carefully constructed system designed to convey information only to the initiated. The deeper one delves into these symbols, the more it becomes apparent that the Templars were not merely soldiers or bankers. They were custodians of a hidden wisdom, a knowledge that may have been powerful enough to rival the authority of kings and popes. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Templars is their seals and insignias. The famous emblem of two knights on a single horse has been interpreted in numerous ways, as a symbol of humility, a representation of brotherhood, or a coded statement about secret teachings. Some scholars have suggested that these images were deliberately designed to encode esoteric truths, accessible only to those trained in the order's inner mysteries. Across Europe, similar symbols appear carved into stone walls, etched onto manuscripts, and hidden in architectural details. What seems at first glance to be decorative or ceremonial may, in fact, be a deliberate effort to preserve knowledge in a world where written words could be seized, altered, or destroyed. Templar manuscripts, many of which were confiscated or lost during the suppression of the order, have fueled centuries of speculation. Descriptions of rituals, coded correspondences, and mystical diagrams suggest that the knights were studying a form of sacred geometry, numerology, and perhaps even alchemical principles. While mainstream historians often dismiss these claims as exaggeration or myth, the consistency and recurrence of certain symbols across Templar sites hint at a structured system of hidden knowledge. Some researchers have gone so far as to propose that these symbols are linked to the search for the Holy Grail, a quest that may have been less about a physical cup and more about the attainment of spiritual and intellectual enlightenment. Rituals played a central role in this hidden system. The Templars were known to practice ceremonies that emphasized secrecy and discipline, where initiates were sworn to absolute loyalty and obedience. Accounts from inquisitions and confessions, often obtained under duress, hint at ceremonies that incorporated cryptic words, secret gestures, and coded messages. While the historical accuracy of these records is debated, they contribute to a broader pattern. The order cultivated an internal culture where knowledge was layered and protected, accessible only to those who had proven their devotion. The secrecy was not arbitrary. It was a safeguard, ensuring that the order's power and wisdom could not be easily appropriated or destroyed. Sacred geometry, a recurring theme in Templar sites, may hold clues to their hidden understanding. Some researchers have noted that preceptories and fortresses were constructed using proportions that mirrored cosmological and mathematical principles. Churches and chapels associated with the Templars often contain unusual alignments, hidden chambers, and intricate carvings that appear to encode symbolic knowledge. This attention to geometry and design suggests that the Templars were not only warriors and bankers, but also practitioners of a disciplined intellectual tradition, one in which architecture and art became vessels for esoteric understanding. The notion of forbidden knowledge is central to the mystique of the Templars. Legends tell of scrolls and artifacts taken from Jerusalem, relics whose significance was deliberately hidden from the public. Some scholars speculate that the order may have encountered knowledge from the East, perhaps mystical texts, scientific discoveries, or religious artifacts, that they preserved and protected. This layer of secrecy reinforces a recurring theme. The Templars' power was not confined to gold and swords, but extended into realms of knowledge that could influence thought, belief, and perhaps even the course of history. Some symbols and practices associated with the Templars have been interpreted as cryptic messages meant to endure through centuries. A carved rose, a hidden cross, or the alignment of stones might appear insignificant to the untrained eye. Yet to the initiated, they could convey instructions, locations, or warnings. The recurrence of these elements across Europe, from France to England, from Portugal to the Levant, suggests a deliberate, long-term strategy to encode and preserve knowledge, a network of symbols that could survive persecution, dissolution, and the passage of time. This secret of culture was inseparable from the Templars' public activities. Their financial empire, their fortresses, and their military campaigns all provided the infrastructure necessary to safeguard esoteric knowledge. Wealth enabled discretion, power enabled protection, secrecy enabled continuity. The visible and invisible components of the order were intertwined, each supporting the other. The Templars' ability to operate in both the mundane and mystical realms gave them a resilience and influence that would outlast even their formal suppression. Ultimately, the allure of the Templars' hidden knowledge lies in its tantalizing incompleteness. We catch glimpses through symbols, manuscripts, and architectural anomalies, but the full scope remains inaccessible. It is this very inaccessibility that fuels fascination. The idea that a medieval order, ostensibly bound by religious vows and martial duty, might have guarded secrets with the potential to reshape our understanding of history. It is a paradox of power, one where the most potent influence is not the wealth that can be counted, but the knowledge that must be discovered, interpreted, and understood. As we trace the traces of their symbols, study the patterns of their architecture, and examine the few surviving manuscripts, one truth becomes clear. The Knights Templar were more than soldiers or financiers. They were guardians of hidden wisdom, custodians of mysteries that were deliberately shielded from the world. Their wealth, both material and intellectual, was designed to endure beyond the lifespan of any individual, and even beyond the political machinations that would later attempt to erase them. The story of the Templars is not simply a tale of crusades and gold. It is the story of a civilization's secret, encoded in stone, ink, and ritual, waiting for those bold enough to uncover it. The wealth of the Knights Templar is legendary, not merely for the material riches they amassed, but for the air of mystery that surrounds it. Gold, silver, jewels, sacred relics. These are the things that capture the imagination, yet they're only the beginning. The Templars' treasure was not just tangible. It was encoded in symbols, hidden in documents, and perhaps even carried through rituals that promised power beyond mere possession. Tales of their hoards have endured for centuries, fueled by eyewitness accounts, confiscation records, and centuries of speculation. Yet for all this searching, very little has been recovered. This absence of evidence only deepens the fascination. allowing imagination to fill the gaps left by history. Among the most famous of their supposed treasures is the so-called temple treasure itself, an accumulation of gold, silver, and precious objects donated to the order by kings, nobles, and wealthy merchants. The Templars' ability to safeguard such wealth was unparalleled. Fortresses across Europe contained secret vaults, often hidden beneath chapels or within subterranean chambers accessible only to those who held the key, both literally and symbolically. Chroniclers of the time speak of confiscations ordered by King Philip IV of France, in which vast stores of gold were seized, or, some claim, disappeared entirely before they could be catalogued. The mystery deepens when one considers that contemporary accounts often conflict, hinting at wealth that may have been spirited away in the chaos of persecution. But the Templar treasure was about more than mere material wealth. Sacred relics were at the center of their holdings, items imbued with religious and mystical significance. Stories tell of fragments of the true cross, chalices associated with Christ, and relics of saints, all carefully guarded within the order's strongholds. These objects were not displayed for public veneration. They were kept secret, their power preserved for those within the Templar network. Some historians argue that the order's obsession with relics was not merely spiritual, but practical. Such items could inspire devotion, command influence, and perhaps even serve as leverage over kings and popes. The quest for the Holy Grail is intertwined with Templar legend, and it is impossible to separate myth from history when discussing their treasures. Some theorists suggest that the Templars discovered a relic of immense significance in Jerusalem, an object whose meaning was deliberately concealed from the outside world. Maps, cryptic texts, and symbols carved into Templar sites may allude to its existence, guiding future generations toward hidden knowledge. Whether this grail was a literal cup, a repository of sacred bloodlines, or a metaphor for enlightenment remains a subject of endless speculation, but the enduring association of the Templars with the Grail reflects a broader pattern. Their treasures were never merely material, but symbolic, layered with meaning and secrecy. In addition to relics, accounts speak of precious manuscripts, containing both practical and mystical knowledge. Some suggest these texts documented financial ledgers so complex and encrypted that even the Order's enemies could not decipher them. Others hint at esoteric treatises on alchemy, sacred geometry, or even advanced science concealed within religious language. The Templars were meticulous in their record-keeping, and yet much of it vanished. Were these documents destroyed in the purge ordered by Philip IV? Or were they hidden, carried to distant lands, or perhaps even encoded within other works to survive centuries of persecution? The very uncertainty fuels the mystery, as historians, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists alike attempt to reconstruct a picture of what might have been lost. Stories of lost hoards across Europe add another layer to the legend. Tales of treasure buried beneath the forested hills of France, hidden in the mountains of Portugal, or secreted in underground tunnels under preceptories abound. Some claim that entire fleets carried Templar gold and sacred artifacts to distant ports, and from there, perhaps even across the Atlantic. Archaeological evidence is scarce, but the persistence of these stories suggests a deliberate effort by the Templars to move, protect, and conceal their wealth from those who would seize it. The idea of a treasure network, a system of vaults and secret paths, is consistent with what is known of their operations, an empire that valued discretion as much as gold. Even more fascinating are the stories that connect Templar treasures to coded maps and hidden knowledge. Certain sites are said to contain cryptic symbols etched into stone, signaling the presence of hidden vaults or guiding future seekers to wealth that was deliberately concealed. Scholars have noted recurring motifs, crosses, geometric patterns, and carvings that appear across multiple Templar sites. Some interpret these as mere decoration, but others suggest they are keys, a visual language created to communicate secrets that could survive destruction and persecution. The repetition of such symbols hints at a methodical, intentional strategy for safeguarding assets, blending financial acumen with esoteric practice. Yet the line between legend and reality is difficult to discern. Some treasures were undoubtedly real, seized by kings and dispersed. Others may have been exaggerated over time, their existence enhanced by centuries of storytelling. What remains indisputable is the Templars' obsession with security, secrecy, and longevity. They understood that their wealth was more than a tool. It was a lifeline for the Order's continued influence. Gold alone could fund armies, construct fortresses, and cement alliances, but hidden knowledge and sacred relics were the ultimate insurance, ensuring that even if the Templars were hunted to the ends of Europe, the essence of their empire could survive. Modern treasure hunters continue to search for traces of Templar wealth, drawn by both the material allure and the symbolic power it represents. Expeditions have scoured forests, cathedrals, and forgotten castles, guided by historical accounts, maps, and the persistent echoes of myth. Some discoveries are tantalizing. Small caches of coins, artifacts, and inscriptions hinting at larger networks. Others remain frustratingly elusive, reinforcing the belief that the Templars' greatest treasures were designed never to be found easily. This tension between discovery and concealment is central to the enduring mystique of the Order. Their wealth is as much a story as it is an object, a narrative encoded across centuries in both stone and legend. In the end, the legacy of Templar treasures lies not simply in gold or jewels, but in the idea that a medieval order could amass and protect wealth in ways that remain almost unimaginable today. Their hidden riches, whether real or symbolic, serve as a reminder of an empire operating in parallel to the known world, a network of power, knowledge, and devotion concealed beneath the surface of history. Every story of lost gold, sacred relic, or hidden manuscript is a thread, part of a tapestry woven by men who understood that true treasure is not only what can be spent, but what can endure, hidden from those who would misuse it, waiting for those clever enough to uncover its secrets. The year 1307 marks one of the most infamous episodes in the history of the Knights Templar, a moment when the invisible threads of their power collided violently with the ambitions of kings. Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, was a ruler whose need for control and wealth was as relentless as it was cunning. Deeply indebted to the Templars, whose coffers financed much of the French monarchy's operations, Philip saw both opportunity and danger in the Order's vast riches. The Templars, with their network of vaults, estates, and financial instruments, represented a power that was independent, organized, and largely beyond the reach of the crown. To Philip, this was unacceptable. What began as a matter of money would become a dramatic political purge, a calculated strike designed to erase the Templars from history while seizing their unparalleled wealth. On a dark October morning, under the cover of dawn, the king issued his orders. Templars across France were arrested simultaneously, accused of heresy, blasphemy, and scandalous misconduct. The coordination of this operation demonstrates Philip's meticulous planning. There could be no leaks, no warning. Knights were dragged from their chambers, often beaten or tortured until confessions, true or fabricated, were extracted. Chroniclers would later record the horror of these events. Men who had sworn vows of devotion to God now faced humiliation, imprisonment, and in many cases, death. The precision of the arrest reflects both the fear Philip felt toward the order and the lengths to which he was willing to go to claim its wealth. Yet the charges brought against the Templars were as suspicious as they were sensational. Allegations of idol worship, secret rituals, and perverse acts were made public, designed to shock and justify what was effectively a royal expropriation. Many historians argue that these accusations were largely manufactured, a veneer of morality laid over an act motivated almost entirely by greed and fear. The irony is stark. The order, dedicated to the protection of pilgrims and the defense of Christendom, was condemned for crimes that appear inconsistent with both their documented practices and the character of its members. Philip's campaign illustrates a recurring theme in history. Power, when threatened, will often cloak ambition in the language of justice, morality, or religion. The confiscation of Templar wealth was both extensive and audacious. Fortresses were seized, estates absorbed into the crown's holdings, and treasure taken under duress. Chronicles from the time suggest that vast stores of gold and silver were collected, yet whispers persist that not all was captured. Some claim that the Templars had anticipated such a betrayal, moving portions of their wealth in secret to locations unknown. Others suggest that the order's esoteric knowledge included methods of hiding assets in ways so sophisticated that even kings could not trace them. These theories, though unverified, contribute to the enduring legend that the Templar treasure may still lie hidden, even after centuries of search and speculation. The reaction of the Church adds another layer of complexity. Pope Clement V, pressured by Philip and dependent on the French crown for political support, reluctantly moved to dissolve the order in 1312. This official dissolution was framed as a necessary act to address the alleged heresies. It was also a legal maneuver designed to legitimize the king's seizure of wealth and property. It is here that the tension between worldly power and spiritual authority becomes most apparent. A religious order, whose purpose was devotion and protection, was undone not by moral failing, but by political and financial calculation. The Church, which might have defended the Templars' sanctity, instead sanctioned their downfall, further obscuring the truth of their wealth and influence. Accounts from those imprisoned hint at the complexity and discipline of the Templars, even in crisis. Some knights reportedly resisted confession, while others, under extreme torture, provided statements that were later recanted. These narratives reveal the human element of the purge: fear, courage, and loyalty intertwined in the shadow of a monumental betrayal. The arrests were not merely a seizure of wealth. They were an attempt to break the very spirit of the order, to erase its power and intimidate any who might claim or continue its legacy. Yet even in defeat, the Templars demonstrated a resilience that would fuel speculation for centuries. The idea that some knights escaped with treasure, knowledge, and the continuity of their secrets intact. Philip's actions had consequences that reverberated far beyond the immediate seizure of wealth. Entire regions were destabilized as Templar estates were redistributed, economies adjusted, and local populations, dependent on Templar protection and infrastructure, were left in uncertainty. The sudden disappearance of such an organized and trusted institution created a vacuum, one that the crown attempted to fill but could never entirely replicate. The Templars' absence left questions unanswered and treasures unaccounted for, a historical gap that continues to invite speculation and mystery. In retrospect, the events of 1307 and the subsequent dissolution of the order highlight a recurring paradox in history. Those who hold wealth and knowledge in secret often provoke both awe and envy, admiration and fear. The Templars' downfall was orchestrated with precision, yet it could not erase the order's influence entirely. Rumors of hidden treasures, lost manuscripts, and secret legacies persisted, carried in whispers through monasteries, forests, and castle ruins. The story of Philip IV's betrayal is not merely a tale of greed and power. It is a pivotal moment in a larger narrative, one that frames the Templars as both victims and architects of a secretive empire that continues to intrigue the world. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this betrayal is the tension between what was seized and what may have escaped. While chroniclers documented the confiscation of estates, gold, and relics, The idea that some treasure vanished, spirited away by loyal knights, or hidden within coded locations, has persisted for centuries. Modern historians debate the veracity of these claims, yet the mystery is an integral part of the Templar legend. It is not simply the gold or artifacts themselves that captivate us. It is the notion that a medieval order, hunted and destroyed, might have left behind a web of hidden wealth and knowledge, designed to endure in secrecy long after their supposed defeat. The Purge of the Knights Templar serves as a stark reminder of the interplay between power, wealth, and fear. Kings and popes, scholars and chroniclers, all played their part in shaping the narrative, yet the full story remains obscured. What Philip IV could seize with armies and accusations, he could not erase entirely. The influence of the Templars persists, whispered through myths, hinted at in architecture, and encoded in symbols whose meanings continue to elude us. In attempting to destroy the order, he may have inadvertently ensured that its legend, and the secrets it safeguarded, would endure far longer than the brief reigns of the kings who sought to claim its gold. The sudden disappearance of a Knights Templar is one of history's most enduring enigmas. By the early 14th century, a network that had spanned continents, managed immense wealth, and wielded influence both subtle and overt was seemingly erased overnight. The arrests of 1307 and the subsequent dissolution of the order by Pope Clement V left behind empty fortresses, confiscated estates, and fractured communities that had long relied on the Templars' protection and administration. To the casual observer, it appeared that the order had simply ceased to exist, a victim of royal ambition and clerical acquiescence. Yet for those willing to look closer, the story is far more complex, hinting at survival, secrecy, and treasures spirited away from the prying eyes of kings. The vanishing of the order was not merely the result of arrests or executions. It was facilitated by a combination of planning, foresight, and the very networks the Templars had meticulously cultivated over centuries. Knights were trained in secrecy and subterfuge, skilled in moving through hostile territories, and prepared to act when danger threatened. Evidence suggests that many high-ranking members anticipated the king's betrayal and arranged for escape routes, hidden caches, and safe houses where members and treasures could be concealed. These disappearances were not random. They were strategic, executed with the precision and discipline that had defined the Templar order throughout its existence. Accounts from the time speak of knights fleeing to remote regions, taking with them both gold and sacred artifacts. Some disappeared into the rugged landscapes of Scotland, Portugal, and Spain, blending into local populations while preserving the knowledge and traditions of the order. Others are said to have ventured further afield, to the Mediterranean islands, Eastern Europe, and perhaps even to the distant lands of the New World. Whether every account is factual or embroidered by legend, the consistency of these stories across centuries suggests that a portion of the order did survive, operating quietly in exile while safeguarding their treasures and knowledge. The mysteries surrounding their survival are compounded by the lack of direct evidence. Official records were destroyed, falsified, or lost, leaving gaps that historians struggle to fill. Yet fragments of correspondence, secret codes and architectural sites, and whispered accounts in monastic circles hint at continuity. Even centuries later, symbols carved into churches and castles, some overlooked, some deliberately concealed, suggest paths taken by fugitive Templars or clues left for those who might follow. It is as though the order anticipated its own persecution, embedding instructions and markers across Europe to ensure that its legacy could survive in hidden form. Part of the intrigue lies in the order's international scope. With properties and preceptories scattered across Europe and the Holy Land, the Templars had multiple layers of escape routes and secure locations. A fortress in France might be lost to Philip IV's forces, but a companion site in Portugal or Spain could serve as a refuge. The order's mastery of covert communication, trusted networks, and coded records allowed information, wealth, and personnel to move undetected. This was not merely survival. It was the preservation of an empire in miniature, capable of continuing its influence even while under apparent siege. The vanishing also gave rise to speculation about secret treasures. Gold, silver, and relics may have been concealed in underground vaults, caves, or remote estates, deliberately left out of reach of the crown. Some suggest that the Templars employed knowledge gleaned from the East, using cryptic maps, coded symbols, and hidden markers to protect their wealth. These treasures, if they exist, are more than material wealth. They are keys to understanding the sophistication of the Order and the lengths to which its members went to ensure continuity. Every rumor of hidden vaults, lost fleets, or secret hordes reinforces the notion that the Templars' disappearance was not total annihilation, but an intentional retreat into secrecy. Stories of surviving knights also intersect with the rise of other secret societies. Legends claim that the Templar diaspora may have influenced the development of the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and other mystical orders. While concrete evidence is sparse, the continuity of symbols, rituals, and esoteric knowledge suggests a passing of the torch from one hidden network to another. In this sense, the Templars may have never truly vanished. They evolved, embedding their wisdom and influence in other structures designed to endure when the original order could not. The psychological impact of the Templars' disappearance was equally profound. The abrupt removal of such a disciplined, wealthy, and far-reaching organization sent shockwaves through Europe. Kings and nobles were unsettled, as the sudden vacuum disrupted trade, local economies, and regional power dynamics. Ordinary people, accustomed to the Order's protection, were left vulnerable, creating both fear and fascination. It is perhaps in this combination of mystery, loss, and unaccounted power that the Templars' legend took root, growing in the imaginations of chroniclers, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists alike. Even today, the vanishing of the Knights Templar invites speculation. Did some knights escape with treasure and knowledge that still remains hidden? Did elements of their financial system, relics, and coded secrets survive in undiscovered vaults or encrypted manuscripts? Are there Templar lineages that quietly persisted in secrecy, influencing events long after the Order's supposed demise? Each unanswered question adds to the tension, creating a narrative that blends history with legend, fact with conjecture. The disappearance of the Order is not merely an end. It is a doorway into centuries of mystery and speculation, one that continues to captivate scholars, adventurers, and seekers of hidden truth. Ultimately, the vanishing of the Templars is a testament to their foresight, organization, and cunning. What appears at first glance as total destruction was, in many ways, a controlled retreat. The Order may have lost its public face, its fortresses, and its formal authority, but the networks they built, the wealth, the knowledge, the symbols, did not vanish entirely. It is this enduring shadow, this persistent whisper of survival, that fuels the fascination with the Knights Templar. Their disappearance is not merely a historical event. It is an invitation to explore the unknown, to question the official record, and to imagine an empire that continues to exist in hidden form, waiting to be discovered by those who dare to seek it. The physical presence of the Knights Templar across Europe and the Holy Land was more than a demonstration of military power. It was a carefully orchestrated network of fortresses, preceptories, and estates, each designed to serve multiple purposes. At first glance, these sites appear as typical medieval constructions: stone walls, battlements, chapels, and living quarters. Yet a closer examination reveals something far more deliberate, something that hints at hidden chambers, encoded designs, and layers of secrecy built into the very foundations. Each stronghold was a node in a larger network, a point of convergence for wealth, knowledge, and influence, and a testament to the strategic genius of the Order. The Templars were master builders, blending functionality with symbolism. Fortresses like Tomar in Portugal, La Couvertourade in France, and the castles of the Holy Land were constructed not merely for defense, but as hubs of administration and secrecy. Beneath their imposing walls lay subterranean passageways, hidden rooms, and vaults designed to store treasure or protect relics. Some chambers were intentionally concealed, accessible only through mechanisms known to the initiated. In an era when secrecy was paramount, architecture itself became a tool, a silent guardian of both material wealth and esoteric knowledge. Many preceptories, often located in remote or strategic areas, were far more than monastic residences. They were economic centers, collecting rents, managing estates, and channeling funds through the Templar network. But these functional spaces were also coated with mystery. Certain stone carvings, spiral staircases, and oddly aligned walls hint at hidden chambers or symbolic meanings. Some researchers believe that the Templars used these architectural cues as a form of communication, a way to transmit knowledge or indicate the presence of concealed treasures. The repetition of certain motifs across Europe, crosses, geometric patterns, and celestial symbols, suggests a deliberate strategy, embedding messages that would endure even if the order were suppressed. In addition to subterranean vaults, some fortresses are said to contain secret escape routes. Narrow tunnels leading beyond the walls, hidden stairways, and disguised exits allowed Templars to evade sieges or capture, ensuring the continuity of personnel and treasure. These passageways were often unknown to local populations, and in some cases, even to the surrounding authorities. The design reflects a level of strategic foresight that extends beyond conventional military planning. The Templars were preparing for both attack and suppression, embedding contingency plans into the very fabric of their buildings. Templar churches and chapels were similarly designed with layers of symbolism. The alignment of walls, the placement of altars, and the incorporation of unusual carvings often defied standard ecclesiastical design. Some historians propose that these elements encoded sacred geometry, numerology, or cosmological knowledge. A chapel was not merely a space for prayer. It could be a map, a mnemonic device, or a repository for spiritual secrets. This duality of purpose, practical and mystical, is central to understanding the Templars' architecture. Every stone, every corridor, every hidden niche may have been deliberately placed to serve multiple functions, blending devotion, defense, and secrecy. The Order's strongholds also served as safe havens for treasures and relics. Gold, silver, manuscripts, and sacred objects were often stored in underground vaults beneath seemingly ordinary rooms. The locations of these vaults were carefully chosen, sometimes beneath chapels, sometimes hidden behind false walls or concealed doors. Access was restricted, knowledge of the chambers limited to a select few. These hidden spaces not only safeguarded material wealth, but also preserved the esoteric and mystical elements of the Order, ensuring that even if their public structures were compromised, the core of the Templars' legacy could survive. The placement of strongholds across Europe and the Levant reflects a sophisticated understanding of geography and influence. Sites were chosen for strategic, economic, and symbolic significance. Castles near trade routes facilitated the movement of goods and money. Preceptories in fertile regions generated income to support the network. Fortresses at borders or in hostile territory allowed control over key regions. This distribution ensured that the Templars' power was both visible and invisible. Their influence extended through economic and military means while remaining shielded from full observation, particularly in areas where persecution or political pressure was likely. Even after the official dissolution of the Order, these strongholds became centers of speculation, legend, and secrecy. Some were absorbed by other monastic orders, while others fell into ruin, leaving only partial traces of the intricate networks they once housed. Yet hints of hidden chambers, secret stairways, and cryptic symbols persist, tantalizing archaeologists, historians, and treasure hunters alike. These sites continue to fuel the narrative that the Templars' wealth and knowledge were never fully captured, that their influence survived in the shadows of stone walls long after the order was formally disbanded. The architecture of the Templars, in this sense, serves as both history and mystery. It tells the story of a disciplined, wealthy, and visionary organization while simultaneously concealing layers of meaning accessible only to those willing to interpret subtle clues. The enduring fascination with these structures lies in this duality. The combination of apparent simplicity and hidden complexity mirrors the order itself. The visible fortresses were impressive enough to deter enemies. The hidden chambers, secret tunnels, and symbolic designs ensured that the true power of the Templars remained largely unseen. Ultimately, the Templar strongholds are a testament to the Order's ingenuity, foresight, and secrecy. They were not merely places to live, fight, or manage wealth. They were integral components of an empire designed to endure beyond the lifespan of any individual knight or king. Every stone laid, every tunnel dug, every carving etched into the walls was a thread in a larger tapestry of hidden influence. To study these sites is to step into the shadow of a network that combined faith, strategy, and cunning into a form of power that was as subtle as it was enduring. In the ruins and hidden chambers of Templar strongholds, one catches glimpses of a civilization that understood that true strength lies not only in what can be seen, but in what is carefully concealed. Among the most enduring and tantalizing legends of the Knights Templar is the idea that their influence, and perhaps their treasures, extended far beyond Europe and the Holy Land. Long before Columbus set sail, some theorists speculate Templar Knights may have ventured across the Atlantic, seeking refuge, wealth, or secret knowledge in lands unknown to the European kingdoms they had once served. While mainstream historians remain skeptical, the persistence of these claims, coupled with tantalizing circumstantial evidence, has fueled centuries of speculation, adventure, and conspiracy theories that continue to captivate the imagination. The theory begins with the last days of the Order in France. As Philip IV orchestrated the arrests and confiscation of assets, some knights reportedly anticipated that no fortress or treasury in Europe would remain safe. The Templars had long demonstrated remarkable foresight, establishing networks of hidden chambers, secret passageways, and encoded symbols across the continent. It is not difficult to imagine that some of their most loyal members might have sought an even more remote refuge, far from the reach of kings, popes, or inquisitors. The vast Atlantic, largely unexplored by Europeans at the time, offered both opportunity and concealment, a blank canvas upon which to preserve the Order's wealth and knowledge. Stories of hidden Templar voyages often center on mysterious ships that left French ports under the cover of night, laden with treasure, manuscripts, and sacred relics. Some suggest that these ships carried not only gold and silver, but also encoded maps and artifacts that contain the key to ancient wisdom. While no conclusive archaeological evidence confirms such journeys, there are intriguing hints. Carvings and inscriptions in North and South America, unexplained artifacts, and local legends of white-bearded men arriving before the official age of exploration. Each of these fragments, taken alone, is ambiguous. Together, they suggest the possibility of a hidden narrative in which the Templars' legacy survived far beyond European borders. The speculation is often tied to particular regions, especially the remote and rugged landscapes of Canada, the Appalachian Mountains, and the highlands of South America. Some researchers claim that hidden Templar forts, marked by geometric stone arrangements or cross-shaped carvings, indicate temporary settlements or secret outposts. Others focus on legends of buried treasure, whispered by local populations, sometimes described as chests of gold, sacred relics, or even manuscripts of lost knowledge. Whether these stories are myth, exaggeration, or rooted in historical truth, they're consistent with the Templars' known penchant for secrecy and the concealment of wealth. One of the most compelling aspects of this theory is the possibility that Templar knowledge, mathematical, astronomical, or navigational, might have enabled transatlantic voyages before Columbus. The Order's documented expertise in logistics, cartography, and resource management suggests they could have undertaken ambitious maritime operations, particularly if motivated by the preservation of treasure or sacred objects. In this context, the Atlantic becomes not merely a body of water, but a bridge connecting the fading European empire of the Templars with a hidden sanctuary across the ocean. Such a journey, if true, would redefine our understanding of medieval exploration, revealing a clandestine network operating centuries ahead of its time. The stories of Templar treasures in the New World are often intertwined with legends of sacred relics. Some claim that the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or other sacred objects were transported overseas to preserve them from persecution. Others suggest that encoded manuscripts containing advanced knowledge, scientific, spiritual, or philosophical, were hidden in secret vaults or buried beneath natural landmarks. The persistence of these legends speaks to a deeper fascination with the Templars, the idea that their mission extended beyond defense and finance, reaching into realms of knowledge, preservation, and secrecy that remain inaccessible even today. Critics dismiss many of these theories as fanciful or unprovable, noting the lack of concrete evidence. Yet the appeal is not merely historical, it is symbolic. The idea of Templar treasures in the New World represents the ultimate endurance of an empire thought destroyed, a continuation of influence in defiance of kings, popes, and history itself. It is a narrative that blends exploration, mystery, and survival, suggesting that the Templar story did not end in 1312 but evolved, leaving hidden markers and clues for those daring enough to seek them centuries later. Some researchers point to peculiar architectural features, stone carvings, and artifacts in remote regions of the Americas as potential evidence of Templar presence. Geometric arrangements resembling European Templar preceptories, cross-shaped symbols etched into rock, and anomalous stonework that does not fit with local indigenous traditions are often cited as tantalizing clues. Whether these are deliberate markers left by fugitive knights or coincidental resemblances, they fuel speculation and serve as modern-day breadcrumbs for treasure hunters and historians seeking to reconstruct a hidden narrative. In addition to physical traces, there are stories of oral tradition, indigenous legends, local myths, and early colonial accounts describe mysterious visitors, unfamiliar technologies, and sacred objects arriving long before mainstream European explorers. While skeptics caution that these accounts are easily misinterpreted or conflated with other historical events, they contribute to the larger tapestry of possibility. The very persistence of these stories across centuries suggests a lingering cultural memory, a shadow of the Templars' influence that transcended time and geography. Ultimately, the theory of Templar treasures in the New World is emblematic of the larger mystery surrounding the Order. It is less about proving voyages or finding chests of gold, and more about the enduring allure of secrecy, foresight, and hidden knowledge. The Templars were masters of survival in both visible and invisible realms, and the notion that they could have preserved elements of their empire across oceans is consistent with what is known of their ingenuity. Even if no definitive treasure is ever found, the legend itself serves as a testament to the audacity and reach of an order whose influence refuses to be confined by time or geography. The New World, in this sense, becomes a canvas for imagination, a place where history, legend, and speculation converge. Templar symbols, whispered accounts, and mysterious artifacts all invite us to question the conventional narrative that the order was destroyed in France, that its treasures were seized, that its influence vanished. Instead, we are left with a vision of a secretive, far-reaching network that may have quietly extended its presence across continents, leaving behind only tantalizing clues and a story that continues to captivate centuries later. The Knights Templar were not merely warriors, financiers, and administrators. They were custodians of knowledge. In an era when information was power, secrecy was survival. Among their most intriguing tools for safeguarding this knowledge were the codes, ciphers, and hidden messages embedded throughout their documents, architecture, and symbols. These encoded elements were not simply decorative or esoteric flourishes. They served as practical measures to protect wealth, transmit instructions, and preserve sacred or strategic knowledge from the eyes of kings, popes, or inquisitors. The Templars understood that information, properly hidden, could be more valuable than gold or land, and they mastered the art of concealment with meticulous precision. From surviving manuscripts to confiscated records, historians have noted cryptic symbols, unusual letter arrangements, and numeric patterns that suggest deliberate encoding. Some of these codes resemble early forms of cryptography, using substitution, rearrangement, or symbolic representation to obscure the true meaning from casual readers. For example, a ledger might appear to list mundane transactions, but contain hidden directives about the location of treasures, the movement of knights, or the allocation of funds across Europe. Even in the most ordinary accounts, patterns emerge that suggest an awareness of secrecy and the necessity of encoding critical information. Beyond financial records, Templar symbols carved into stone and may have functioned as visual ciphers. The two knights on a single horse, repeated geometric patterns, and seemingly ornamental crosses could convey messages to those trained to interpret them. These symbols may indicate locations of hidden chambers, secret treasures, or safe routes for fugitives. Some researchers propose that these visual codes operated much like a map or instruction manual, allowing Templars dispersed across vast distances to maintain cohesion and communicate without reliance on written documents that could be seized or destroyed. The use of numerology is another fascinating aspect of Templar coding. Certain numbers, letters, and sequences appear repeatedly in manuscripts, architectural layouts, and symbolic carvings. Some scholars suggest that these were used not only for spiritual or mystical purposes, but also as practical keys to hidden messages. A repeated numeric pattern might correspond to a location, a date, or a specific instruction. In an era when literacy and numeracy were not universal, such codes would have been accessible only to the initiated, creating layers of security that kept knowledge confined to those trusted by the order. Some surviving Templar documents hint at more elaborate cryptographic systems. Letters sent between preceptories may have contained deliberate ambiguities, code words, or ciphers designed to mislead anyone outside the order. Even confessions obtained under duress during the arrests of 1307 demonstrate a keen awareness of secrecy. Knights frequently provided partial truths, deliberately obscured details, or employed language that could be interpreted in multiple ways. In this sense, the Templars' mastery of communication was as sophisticated as their financial or military operations, blending caution with ingenuity to protect the order's core. The architecture of the Templars also seems to reflect hidden codes. Some fortresses and chapels are aligned with celestial bodies, cardinal points, or geometric principles that may convey hidden knowledge. A staircase, a vaulted chamber, or the placement of an altar could serve dual purposes, functional for daily life, but symbolic or coded for those trained to read it. These architectural codes would allow information to survive even if written records were destroyed, embedding secrets into structures that would outlast generations of kings, wars, and inquisitions. Interestingly, Some theorists suggest that the Templar codes extended into sacred or mystical knowledge. Manuscripts may contain allegorical or symbolic instructions, blending spiritual teachings with practical information about treasure, routes, or alliances. The use of religious imagery, biblical references, and esoteric symbolism allowed messages to appear purely devotional while containing hidden meanings comprehensible only to trained initiates. This blending of the sacred and the practical is characteristic of the Templars. They operated in a world where secrecy, strategy, and spirituality were inseparable. The persistence of these codes, long after the dissolution of the order, has fueled speculation and investigation. Treasure hunters, historians, and cryptographers have attempted to decipher Templar manuscripts, architectural clues, and symbolic motifs, often with partial success. The results are tantalizing. Small discoveries suggest networks of knowledge, hidden vaults, or overlooked documents, yet the full scope of the Templars' encoded wisdom remains elusive. This is the essence of their enduring mystique. Information that was meant to survive yet remain inaccessible, a testament to their foresight and discipline. The use of cryptography also hints at the broader strategy of the Templars. They were aware of the vulnerabilities inherent in power and wealth, and they designed systems to endure persecution. Codes ensured that even if the visible order was destroyed, its knowledge, treasures, and operational secrets could survive. The integration of financial, architectural, and symbolic codes into a cohesive system reflects a level of sophistication rarely seen in medieval organizations, underscoring the Templars' reputation as not only warriors and bankers, but masters of strategy, secrecy, and preservation. Finally, the Templar codes continue to inspire modern investigation and imagination. The allure lies not just in deciphering symbols or finding hidden treasure, but in contemplating an organization capable of embedding complex information into every aspect of its existence. Their ciphers represent more than security measures. They are evidence of a worldview in which knowledge is power, secrecy is survival, and influence extends beyond the visible. Every manuscript, symbol, and architectural anomaly invites the observer to question what was hidden, why, and how it might endure. The Templars' codes are, in essence, a bridge across time, connecting us to a secretive empire whose whispers still echo in the stone, parchment, and legend they left behind. Among the most enduring and captivating legends surrounding the Knights Templar is their alleged connection to the Holy Grail, the most iconic of sacred relics. For centuries, the Grail has been depicted as a vessel of divine power, a repository of spiritual enlightenment, or even a literal container of Christ's blood. What makes the Templars' association with it so compelling is not merely the story itself, but the implication that they were custodians of secrets that transcended wealth and warfare, secrets capable of reshaping spiritual and political landscapes alike. Unlike conventional relics kept in churches for veneration, the Grail, in Templar lore, represents knowledge and power preserved in secrecy, hidden from those deemed unworthy. The connection between the Templars and the Grail appears in a variety of historical and literary sources. Early accounts suggest that during their campaigns in Jerusalem, the knights may have encountered sacred relics in the Temple of Solomon or other revered sites. Some historians propose that the Templars, as protectors of pilgrims and as administrators of holy sites, gained access to objects of immense spiritual significance, objects that were never meant for public display. These relics, including the Grail, would have been transported carefully, stored in secret chambers, and cataloged only in the cryptic records and symbols accessible to the Order's inner circle. Legends also link the Templars to a broader network of sacred knowledge. The Grail is frequently described as containing more than physical sustenance. It is a symbol of divine wisdom, immortality, or a key to hidden truths. Some theorists suggest that the Grail, in the hands of the Templars, was both a spiritual and strategic instrument, a treasure whose value extended beyond gold or silver. It may have functioned as a symbol of authority, a tool for negotiating power with kings and popes, or even as a guide to understanding esoteric principles, connecting geometry, astronomy, and sacred ritual in ways that were deliberately concealed from outsiders. The physicality of the Grail in Templar tradition is often entwined with the Order's other treasures. Chronicles, both contemporary and later, hint at hidden chambers within fortresses, subterranean vaults, and encoded manuscripts where sacred objects were stored. Some claim that the Grail itself was concealed in such a place, its location encoded through symbols carved into walls, patterns in stonework, or cryptic maps. Even the architectural alignments of Templar chapels and fortresses have been interpreted as clues to the Grail's resting place, suggesting a deliberate integration of sacred relics into the infrastructure of secrecy that defined the Order. Some accounts even suggest that the Grail was not a singular object, but part of a lineage of sacred vessels or relics that the Templars safeguarded. This aligns with the Order's broader practice of collecting and preserving sacred objects, from fragments of the true cross to relics associated with saints and biblical figures. Each item may have carried symbolic, spiritual, or practical significance, and each was meticulously hidden to ensure its survival. The Templars' reverence for such relics speaks to their belief in a form of knowledge that is at once tangible and mystical, blending devotion with strategy. The symbolic dimension of the Grail is perhaps even more intriguing. In Templar lore, it is not simply a cup, but a metaphor for hidden wisdom. Some researchers argue that the quest for the Grail mirrors the Order's pursuit of knowledge and enlightenment, encoded in manuscripts, architecture, and secret rituals. The Grail represents an ideal, a secret held by a select few, guarded with discipline, and transmitted across generations. This interpretation resonates with the Templars' broader emphasis on secrecy and preservation, suggesting that their true treasure was not only material, but intellectual and spiritual. The Grail legend also intersects with the Templars' alleged voyages and hidden networks. Some theorists propose that sacred relics, including the Grail, may have been transported to distant lands during the persecution of 1307. If some knights escaped with these treasures, it is possible that the Grail or related relics were hidden in remote fortresses, crypts, or even overseas. Such speculation, while unverified, reinforces the notion that the Templar story did not end with their dissolution. Their sacred responsibilities and treasures may have continued in secret, preserved by loyal initiates or dispersed across hidden locations. The fascination with the Templar Grail connection is amplified by the blending of historical record and myth. Medieval chroniclers, later literary works, and modern researchers have all contributed layers of interpretation, some grounded in fact, others in legend. Yet the persistence of the story suggests a kernel of truth, that the Templars, through their unparalleled access to holy sites, sacred relics, and esoteric knowledge, may have been entrusted with, or discovered, objects and wisdom considered too powerful for general exposure. This duality of myth and history creates a narrative rich in mystery and suspense, one that continues to fuel exploration, scholarship, and speculation centuries later. Even the Order's rituals seem intertwined with the Grail narrative. Accounts of Templar ceremonies hint at symbolic reenactments, coded prayers, and ritualized gestures that may have referenced sacred relics, including the Grail. These practices, often misinterpreted or demonized by inquisitors, suggest that the Order's spirituality was deeply connected to secrecy, symbolism, and the safeguarding of divine knowledge. Ritual became both a spiritual exercise and a protective measure, ensuring that the deepest truths remained accessible only to the initiated. In contemplating the Templar connection to the Grail, one is confronted with the broader theme of hidden power. The Grail, in this context, is more than an object. It is a symbol of the order's enduring influence. It embodies their mastery of secrecy, their ability to protect knowledge, and their capacity to operate in parallel to the visible structures of church and state. The Templars' alleged guardianship of the Grail demonstrates that their true empire was not only built of stone and gold, but also of information, ritual, and spiritual authority, a network whose full extent may never be known. Ultimately, the Templar Grail connection continues to captivate because it is a story that blends history, mysticism, and conspiracy. Whether the Grail exists as a physical object or a symbolic repository of knowledge, the Templars' association with it underscores their extraordinary ability to preserve secrets against the forces of suppression. The legend invites us to imagine a medieval order whose influence transcended the battlefield and the treasury, extending into the realms of sacred wisdom, spiritual insight, and esoteric preservation. In this light, the Grail is not merely a relic of legend. It is a lens through which we glimpse the hidden genius and enduring mystery of the Knights Templar. Scotland has always existed on the edge of myth, a land shaped by wind, stone, and secrets, where history often feels indistinguishable from legend. When the Knights Templar vanished from the political stage of Europe after the arrests of 1307, it was here, in this northern kingdom beyond the direct reach of the French crown and the papacy, that their trail appears to flicker back into view. The stories are whispered in quiet glens, in ancient churches, and carved into weather-worn stones. Tales of exiled knights, hidden relics, and a treasure that needed a sanctuary far from hostile eyes. If any place could have offered such refuge, it was Scotland, remote, rebellious, and fiercely independent. To understand why Scotland became central to Templar lore, one must look first at its ruler at the time, Robert the Bruce. Excommunicated and at war with England, Bruce was a man isolated from European support. He had every reason to welcome skilled warriors who were suddenly fugitives of the Church. The Templars, likewise betrayed and hunted, would have seen in Bruce a leader who stood outside papal authority, a perfect ally. Though official documentation is sparse, legends claim that ships fleeing from the French port of La Rochelle sailed not only to Portugal and the Mediterranean, but also to the rugged coasts of Argyll and the Western Isles. Some accounts say a fleet arrived under cover of mist, carrying knights, chests of valuables, and sacred relics that had to be protected at any cost. These exiled knights, according to tradition, integrated quietly into Scottish noble circles. They adopted local forms of dress, pledged loyalty directly to Bruce, and remained anonymous to avoid drawing unwanted attention from the Church. Yet their influence is said to have emerged dramatically at one pivotal moment in Scottish history, the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. As the story goes, when the Scottish lines wavered under heavy English assault, a mysterious contingent of armored horsemen appeared on the ridge. They charged with precision and force, turning the tide of the battle. Some chroniclers describe them as fresh knights in white surcoats, an appearance that sparked rumors of Templar intervention. Whether literal or symbolic, the idea that Templars fought alongside Bruce became embedded in Scottish folklore and sustained the belief that they found a permanent refuge here. But the heart of the Scottish Templar mystery beats most famously within the stone walls of Rosslyn Chapel. Constructed in the 15th century by the Sinclair family, a lineage long associated with Templar alliances, Rosslyn is unlike any other chapel in Europe. Every pillar, arch, and corbel seems to hide a secret. The carvings depict scenes from the Old and New Testaments, but they also include motifs that appear strangely out of place. Maize and aloe-like plants not known to Europe until after Columbus, geometric patterns reminiscent of Templar architecture, and figures that appear to merge biblical symbolism with esoteric imagery. Some researchers claim the original plans of the chapel reflect the architectural proportions of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem, long held sacred by the Templars. One of the central legends surrounding Rosslyn is that beneath its floor lies a sealed crypt holding the greatest treasures of the Templar Order. Perhaps even the Grail itself, or the Ark of the Covenant, or scrolls taken from beneath the Temple Mount. The Sinclair family has never permitted archaeological excavation of the crypt, feeding speculation for centuries. Visitors describe a sense of profound stillness inside the chapel, as though the stone itself remembers a secret agreement made long ago. It is a place where faith, myth, and geometry blur together, and even skeptics often leave with the unsettling feeling that the carvings are trying to communicate something hidden and ancient. Rosslyn is not the only site tied to Templar refugees. Across Scotland, traces of their presence are woven subtly into the landscape. Remote valleys contain place names with temple or temple lands. Old churchyards preserve symbols resembling the Templar cross. Fragmented medieval documents refer to brother knights living under the protection of various clans. These clues are faint, fragile, and often ambiguous. Yet together they form a constellation of possibilities, the outline of a hidden network. In the Highlands, legends speak of chests of gold carried into mountain caves and buried beneath cairns known only to a handful of trusted guardians. Islanders in the Hebrides tell stories of foreign knights who lived among them for a generation, teaching new construction methods, surveying techniques, and navigational knowledge. What makes Scotland especially compelling is that it stood at the crossroads of shifting medieval power. It was the last place in Europe where Rome's authority held little sway, and where exiled warriors could disappear into clan society with ease. It offered natural fortresses, deep glens, rugged coastlines, and labyrinthine caves carved by volcanic stone. A treasure hidden here could remain undiscovered for centuries. More importantly, Scotland preserved oral tradition better than most nations. Its bards, chroniclers, and storytellers kept alive tales that written history ignored or dismissed. Tales of guardianship, brotherhood, and secret oaths. Some historians argue that the Templars in Scotland narrative is symbolic rather than literal, a way of expressing how ideas, not individuals, survived. Yet the persistence of the legends suggests something more substantial. There are, after all, questions that mainstream history still cannot answer. Why do certain Freemasonic traditions claim roots in both the Sinclairs and the Templars? Why does Rosslyn contain iconography that predates known historical influences? Why did the Order of the Temple continue to appear in obscure Scottish records long after its official dissolution? Even if no gold or sacred relics ever reached Scotland, the country undeniably preserves something of the Templar legacy. A philosophy, a way of building, a set of symbols, perhaps even a map of knowledge passed quietly from one generation to the next. The hidden wealth in this context may not have been material at all. It may have been the intellectual and esoteric inheritance the Templars carried. The culmination of their experiences in the Holy Land, their architectural studies beneath Solomon's Temple, and their centuries-old network of coded communication. The idea of a Grail kingdom in the north may not be a literal reference to a chalice, but a metaphor for a sanctuary of wisdom. In the isolation of the Highlands, in the carved mysteries of Rosslyn, in the whispered stories of Bannockburn, Scotland became the final canvas on which the Templar myth could be preserved without interference. The treasure, whether physical or metaphysical, found a home in a country whose soul naturally resonated with secrecy, independence, and the guardianship of ancient lore. And so, the Scottish chapter of the Templar saga endures not because of what has been conclusively proven, but because of what remains tantalizingly possible. Somewhere in the convergence of legend and stone, of martial history and sacred geometry, of recorded fact and persistent rumor, lies the enduring belief that the Knights Templar chose Scotland as the custodian of their final and most precious wealth. A belief that still draws seekers, scholars, and dreamers to its mist-covered hills. When the visible power of the Knights Templar collapsed in the early 14th century, an odd phenomenon began to take shape across Europe. Their castles, ships, and commanderies largely fell silent. Yet something subtle and persistent remained, something that did not vanish with the arrests, the trials, or the burning of Jacques de Molay. It lived in ledgers, in accounting methods, in discreet merchant practices, and in the quiet hands of families who had once stood as allies to the order. Like a ghost drifting through the corridors of European finance, the presence of the Templars lingered long after their official extinction. To understand this hidden continuity, one must remember that the Templars were not merely warriors and monks. They were administrators, bankers, brokers, notaries, and record keepers. Their wealth was not just gold stored in vaults. It was a network of lines, signatures, and obligations extending across kingdoms. Monarchs owed them money. Merchants relied on them. Nobles trusted their vaults and their codes. When the order was dissolved, these financial relationships did not simply vanish. They were absorbed, redirected, or quietly inherited by those who understood their mechanisms. Europe, in the centuries that followed, became a landscape of emerging banks and merchant houses, some of which appeared to rise almost overnight with suspicious ease. They operated with techniques strikingly similar to the ones the Templars had pioneered: letters of credit, coded receipts, secure deposits, and long-distance financial transfers. The names of these early institutions rarely acknowledged any connection to the Templars, yet historians have long noted how abruptly Europe transitioned from a feudal economy to one deeply reliant on credit and structured finance. It was as if someone had left a blueprint behind, a map of how to control wealth without ever needing to display it. Some researchers believe this continuity can be traced to the very individuals who survived the destruction of the order. The Templars had trained generations of scribes, treasurers, and administrators. Many of these men went underground, adopting new identities or joining other organizations. Some likely continued their work under the protection of families who had once benefited from Templar services. In cities like Florence, Venice, Bruges, and Cologne, merchant guilds suddenly demonstrated financial innovations that reflected Templar systems with uncanny precision. The ghost of the temple moved silently from monastery vaults and accounting houses and trading firms. There is a curious incident often cited by economic historians. Within decades of the Templars' dissolution, several European banking families emerged whose records begin abruptly, with no clear lineage or gradual growth. It is as if their wealth and expertise materialized out of thin air. Some attribute this leap to trade, others to political alliances. But alternative historians suggest that the disappearance of Templar wealth coincides too neatly with the rise of certain financial dynasties. Perhaps the treasure was not lost at all. Perhaps it simply changed custodians. One of the most intriguing aspects of this financial ghost is the persistence of Templar-style secrecy. The order had always operated with coded messages, hidden inventories, and compartmentalized knowledge. After its collapse, similar practices spread across trade guilds and merchant families. Contracts began to include ambiguous clauses known only to initiates. Ledgers were written in scripts or ciphers that required specialized training to interpret. Even the concept of banking privacy, which would later define Swiss finance, seems to echo Templar principles of protecting client information at all costs. Speaking of Switzerland, its role in the post-Templar financial landscape remains one of the most debated topics among researchers. Switzerland was not yet a unified nation during the Templar era, but its mountainous terrain offered natural protection and political neutrality. Some theories suggest that fugitive Templars carried their portable wealth, gold, relics, documents, and encoded ledgers into remote valleys where local cantons offered refuge. Whether or not this is true, What is undeniable is that the Swiss banking tradition, founded centuries later, displays remarkable alignment with Templar methods, decentralized power, discrete vaults, and a culture of absolute confidentiality. Another thread in this hidden financial legacy leads to maritime trade. In the centuries after the Templars' fall, certain shipping families gained access to routes once controlled by the order. These routes were valuable, not just for goods, but for information. Control of maritime intelligence was one of the Templars' greatest strengths, and the families who inherited their maps and networks could exert influence far beyond their apparent size. It is no coincidence that many of Europe's most prosperous port cities, Lisbon, La Rochelle, Venice, and Marseille, are all steeped in stories of Templar alliances, disappearances, and secret cargoes. Even the architecture of later financial buildings hints at a Templar influence. Some early banks and merchant halls adopted geometric proportions reminiscent of Templar preceptories. Certain symbols, double squares, the eight-pointed star, the circular seal, began to appear as decorative motifs in places where money was stored or exchanged. These marks were subtle, often decorative, yet unmistakably linked to a tradition that should have disappeared. They suggest a continuity not in name, but in philosophy. As centuries passed, the Templar legacy grew more difficult to trace with certainty. By the Renaissance, the ghost had been absorbed into a vast network of financial and political institutions. But some anomalies remained difficult to dismiss. For example, rare references in later accounting documents mention funds held in trust since the time of the Temple. Certain legal cases from the 1500s refer to debts or obligations based on ancient agreements whose origins are never explained. And quietly preserved within the archives of a few old noble families are symbols and seals once associated with the Templars' financial offices. Perhaps the most tantalizing evidence lies in the disappearance of specific ledgers from the French archives. During the arrests of 1307, royal agents seized vast quantities of Templar documents. Yet many of the key accounting books, those that would have revealed the location of foreign deposits or investments, are missing. Some believe they were destroyed. Others believe they were intercepted and taken to safety. The Templars were experts at reducing paper trails when necessary. A carefully planned evacuation of documents could have ensured that the order's financial structure survived even after the organization ceased to exist publicly. What makes this financial ghost so compelling is the possibility that it was not a mere byproduct of collapse, but a deliberate strategy. The Templars had long understood that visible power invites attack, but invisible power can endure indefinitely. By decentralizing wealth, dispersing knowledge among trusted allies, and embedding financial practices into broader European society, the order may have ensured its survival in another form. Not as knights in white mantles, but as principles, systems, and codes that shaped the evolution of Europe's economic world. Today, the echoes of the Templar financial legacy appear not in treasure chests or hidden vaults, but in the very structure of modern finance, in the persistence of private banking traditions, in the coded transactions of medieval trade that evolved into modern letters of credit, in the vaults of old European banks that still use architectural designs rooted in ancient security methods, and, perhaps most intriguingly, in the existence of financial trusts and family estates whose origins remain obscure, yet whose continuity stretches back centuries. The wealth of the Templars may have vanished from sight, but did not vanish from influence. It seeped quietly into the foundations of Europe's financial systems, becoming a ghost that shaped the living world. A ghost that still lingers in symbols, in secrets, and in the strange continuity of institutions that never quite explain where their power truly began. Across Europe and beyond, scattered like fragments of a broken map, are whispers of vaults, chambers, and subterranean structures that some believe hold the lost wealth of the Knights Templar. These stories arise in places far apart. Portugal's quiet fortresses, French chateaux sealed for centuries, the mysterious pits of Nova Scotia, the catacombs beneath Polish forests, and the hidden cellars beneath medieval commanderies. They vary in tone, in detail, in credibility. But they share one unbroken thread: the persistent belief that the Templar treasure still exists somewhere, waiting beneath layers of stone, secrecy, and time. The rumors begin in Portugal, a land whose relationship with the Templars was unlike any other. After the order's suppression, the Portuguese crown refused to condemn the Knights. Instead, their properties, archives, and perhaps a portion of their wealth were transferred into a new order, the Order of Christ. Many historians argue that Portugal became the primary sanctuary for Templar assets. The strongholds of Tomar and Almoral still evoke an eerie sense of guardianship, as if they were designed not merely as fortresses, but as protectors of something buried within or beneath them. Legends speak of underground passages beneath Tomar's circular rotunda, where Templar-like carvings appear in places rarely accessible to the public. Some believe that deep below its foundations, sealed chambers contain sacred objects rescued from France. Relics, manuscripts, or coded ledgers that map the network of hidden deposits across Europe. France itself, despite being the heart of the Templar downfall, remains at the center of treasure narratives. Too many chateaux carry stories of sealed rooms that no owner has ever opened. Too many accounts mention workmen who, while renovating old estates, stumbled upon walls that rang hollow. In regions once controlled by the Templars, Poitou, Burgundy, Champagne, there are tales of secret vaults constructed in the final years before the arrests. These vaults were said to be built beneath wells, behind altars, or under the floors of commanderies where only the highest-ranking officers had access. Some chronicles, written decades after the trials, hint at containers of iron and oak that were deliberately hidden to escape royal confiscation. Though mainstream historians often dismiss these accounts as folklore, the stubborn continuity of these stories suggests that something material may indeed have disappeared under cover of darkness. Far to the northeast, in the dense forests of Poland, another legend emerges. During the upheavals of the early 14th century, several Templar estates in Eastern Europe received sudden shipments from the West, described cryptically in local records. When these properties later changed hands, the inventories listed normal items, tools, livestock, weaponry, but made no mention of the shipments. In the 20th century, explorers investigating abandoned German war tunnels near the Owl Mountains uncovered unusual medieval symbols carved into stones that had been reused in the construction. Some believe these stones were taken from old Templar sites, and that the surrounding region still conceals hidden chambers hastily sealed long before modern borders existed. But perhaps the most famous and persistent of all treasure theories lies across the Atlantic, on a small island in Nova Scotia known as Oak Island. There, the so-called money pit has captured imaginations for more than 2 centuries. Workers have found layers of oak platforms, coconut fiber not native to North America, and a baffling system of flood tunnels engineered with a sophistication far beyond what most early settlers possessed. The theory that Templars, possibly traveling with Portuguese or Scottish allies, reached the New World long before Columbus is highly controversial. Yet the carvings found on nearby stones, some resembling Templar crosses or coded markings, continue to fuel speculation. If the Templars possessed maps or knowledge from the Holy Land that hinted at lands across the Atlantic, Oak Island could have been the perfect hiding place, remote, unclaimed, and far beyond the reach of their enemies. The idea that chests of gold, scrolls, or relics lie deep within its flooded chambers persist despite centuries of failed excavation attempts. Other sites in North America carry their own whispers. In areas once inhabited by the Mi'kmaq and Algonquin peoples, There exist oral traditions of pale warriors with crimson crosses arriving long before European colonization. While these stories are debated, they contribute to a wider narrative that the Templars may have carried something precious across the sea and hidden it in lands unknown to the rest of the world. Yet one need not cross oceans to sense the presence of unresolved secrets. In Switzerland, deep beneath mountain valleys, lie vaults whose origins predate the creation of modern banks. Some are sealed with ancient chains or reinforced stone walls that no record explains. Locals speak of the old treasure caves that belonged not to the Swiss, but to traveling knights who passed through seeking safe refuge. Switzerland's isolation and strict local autonomy would have made it an ideal location for securing deposits that needed long-term protection. Although no direct physical evidence ties these vaults to the Templars, their age, secrecy, and unusual construction raise questions that historians have yet to fully answer. In England, too, the Templar legacy persists in fragments. Hidden crypts beneath churches, sealed doors and preceptories left untouched for centuries, and manuscripts hinting at inventories that were never recovered. One particular site in Hertfordshire, known for its Templar associations, contains a network of subterranean chambers filled with carvings and symbols. Some believe this site was once a ritual space, others that it was a treasury. The truth remains uncertain, but the craftsmanship suggests a purpose greater than mere storage. What all these places share is a sense of deliberate concealment. Whether or not they contain gold, the meticulous construction of hidden rooms, the coded symbols carved into their entrances, and the secrecy surrounding their histories all reflect a mindset dedicated to preservation. If the Templars anticipated their downfall, or even sensed the growing hostility of King Philip IV, they would have had every reason to scatter their wealth into multiple vaults, each known only to a handful of trusted brothers. The disappearance of so many official inventory books from the French raids suggests that the order took measures to obscure the location of their assets. A treasure divided into dozens of hidden caches would be nearly impossible to permanently erase. In the end, the fascination with these vaults does not depend entirely on whether they still hold physical treasure. It is the possibility that compels people, the idea that somewhere, beneath soil or stone, lies a direct connection to a vanished empire. A chest filled with gold would be remarkable, but a chest filled with relics, scrolls, maps, or coded manuscripts would be transformative. It would rewrite history. When the myths, the scattered vaults, the financial ghosts, and the whispered escape routes are all placed together like pieces of an ancient mosaic, a deeper and more unsettling image begins to appear. One that suggests the Knights Templar were never simply hoarding wealth. They were directing it, shaping it, preparing it for something far greater than coin, land, or even survival. Their treasure, whether hidden physically in stone chambers or dispersed invisibly through evolving financial systems, seems to reflect a grand design that stretched far beyond the lifespan of any single generation. It was as if the Order believed they were custodians of a mission that would unfold not in their time, but in a distant future for which they were merely the architects. To understand this possibility, one must look not at the Templars as warriors or bankers, but as visionaries who carried a unique blend of sacred duty and strategic foresight. They operated across continents, mastered languages and trade routes, collected ancient knowledge, and maintained alliances with cultures and faiths they were supposedly at war with. The traditional narrative of the Middle Ages paints Europe as isolated, fractured, and rigid, yet the Templars existed as an anomaly within this world. They possessed a global perspective centuries before globalization became a concept. Their wealth, then, may have been the scaffolding for a longer, more ambitious plan, one rooted in prophecy, sacred mathematics, and the preservation of knowledge that earlier civilizations believed must never be lost. Some theories suggest the Templars saw themselves not merely as defenders of Christianity, but as custodians of a lineage stretching back to the builders of Solomon's Temple. If they truly uncovered scrolls, architectural plans, or relics beneath the Temple Mount, such discoveries could have carried instructions or warnings intended for a future age. The idea that the Templars were preserving a blueprint for a renewed world order has persisted across centuries. Whether metaphorical or literal, this concept aligns with the Order's obsession with sacred geometry and divine proportions. Their churches were built with mathematical precision, their seals encoded with symbolism, their rituals infused with references to wisdom older than medieval Europe itself. If such knowledge existed, it was not the kind to be displayed openly. It would have needed protection, distribution, and redundancy. Wealth, true, enduring wealth, was necessary to safeguard it. Gold could purchase loyal allies, hidden strongholds, and secrecy. Land could provide isolated places for study, initiation, and preservation. And financial systems could ensure continuity even after the fall of kingdoms or the destruction of castles. Seen through this lens, the Templars' treasure was not an end in itself. It was a tool, and perhaps the least important one. The real treasure may have been the network, the people, the ideas, the coded systems, and the infrastructure capable of surviving catastrophe. When the Order dissolved, those elements did not dissolve with it. They simply retreated from visibility. Scotland may have guarded relics. Portugal may have preserved navigation knowledge. Switzerland may have harbored financial practices. And France, despite its persecution, may have inadvertently scattered seeds of the Templar legacy through confiscated archives and displaced families who carried fragments of their mission. If the Templars were preparing for a grand design, what might that design have been? Some believe it was the reconstruction of Solomon's Temple, a symbolic act representing the restoration of a lost spiritual order. Others suggest they sought to protect the lineage or teachings associated with the Holy Grail, whether understood as a physical object, a bloodline, or a mystical concept. More grounded interpretations propose that the Templars foresaw the fragility of medieval society and worked to preserve knowledge, scientific, architectural, navigational, that might otherwise have perished in the turbulence of plagues, wars, and political collapse. There is an uncanny coincidence that, centuries after the Templars' suppression, Europe entered the Renaissance, a sudden flowering of geometry, symbolism, exploration, and rediscovered ancient wisdom. Many of the individuals who catalyzed this cultural rebirth belonged to families, guilds, and institutions whose histories intersect with Templar spheres of influence. It is as though a hidden current resurfaced, guiding the world toward a broader horizon shaped long before its time. Alternatively, some view the Templars' long-term strategy as less mystical and more pragmatic. They were building a shadow infrastructure capable of withstanding the collapse of kingdoms. Their financial techniques predicted modern banking. Their logistical networks foreshadowed modern supply chains. Even their hierarchical structure, divided into cells with limited knowledge, mirrors the organization of modern clandestine operations. In this interpretation, the Templars inadvertently created the first prototype of a decentralized global system, one that could survive the destruction of its visible leadership. But the most compelling interpretation blends both the mystical and the practical. The Templars were warriors of faith, but also men of commerce, engineering, law, and science. Their worldview did not separate sacred duty from earthly strategy. They may have believed that their mission required both spiritual purity and economic power, both hidden knowledge and open influence. Their treasure could therefore be seen as the convergence of everything they valued: relics that embodied divine authority, scrolls that preserved ancient truth, gold that secured their independence, and networks that allowed them to operate beyond kings and borders. If such a grand design existed, it was never meant to be written plainly. Its clues lie in scattered symbols, in architectural alignments, in cryptic maps, in the continuity of secretive organizations that emerged after the Order's fall. Some believe that successor groups inherited different pieces of the original mission, never fully aware of the whole, but guided by fragments. Freemasons, Rosicrucians, certain royal families, and various learned societies have all been linked, sometimes unfairly, sometimes persuasively, to the Templar legacy. Whether these associations are true or merely echoes of a powerful myth, they reflect the enduring belief that the Order's story did not end at the stake of Jacques de Molay. What seems increasingly certain is that the Templars did not face their destruction unprepared. Their wealth was not scattered in panic, but dispersed with intention. Their knowledge was not lost, but hidden. And their influence did not vanish. It evolved, transformed, and seeped into the hidden architecture of Western civilization. The treasure, in this sense, becomes a metaphor for the unseen structures that shape the world, structures forged by an order that believed it served a purpose greater than itself. Whether that purpose has been fulfilled, or whether it still waits in silence beneath ancient vaults and encoded manuscripts, remains a question that continues to draw seekers, scholars, and dreamers alike. In the convergence of wealth, knowledge, and prophecy, the Templars may have built not just an empire, but a legacy designed to outlive the rise and fall of nations. As the centuries unfolded, a strange pattern began to reveal itself, an undercurrent that connected distant places, unrelated events, and silent actors who seemed to operate from the shadows. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like a faint thread woven into the fabric of history. But with time, and with careful study, the thread became more visible, suggesting that the legacy of the Knights Templar had not vanished with the collapse of their order. Rather, it had transformed, spreading through channels that were never meant to be illuminated by the ordinary eye. The suppression of the Templars may have struck down their visible presence, but it failed to extinguish the deeper current they had set into motion. Throughout Europe, certain architectural motifs began to appear long after the Order's dissolution. Geometric patterns, coded inscriptions, and sacred proportions that mimicked the designs found in Templar chapels. These were built by hands separated by time and geography, yet united by a mysterious adherence to the same ancient principles. Whether these builders fully understood the origins of the symbols they used, or whether they were simply following traditions passed down through guilds and secret fraternities, remains uncertain. But their presence suggests the survival of a wisdom that the Templars had carried and guarded. Even in regions where the Order had never officially operated, sudden bursts of knowledge appeared. Advances in engineering, navigation, astronomy, and architecture that seemed out of place for their era. Scholars debated whether such developments were merely coincidences or the work of hidden custodians preserving fragments of a larger, older system. Yet the consistency of certain patterns, particularly in navigation and sacred geometry, implied something more deliberate. The knowledge looked transplanted rather than discovered, like seeds that had been waiting patiently beneath the surface for the right moment to grow. Across the oceans, explorers charted new worlds using techniques suspiciously aligned with the navigational methods attributed to the Templar successors in Portugal. Some maps from the Age of Discovery contained details that could not have been acquired without older, more advanced sources, knowledge that predated the voyages themselves. These anomalies, long dismissed as errors or fantasies, have begun to draw new interest. They suggest that the treasure left behind by the Templars was not merely gold or relics, but knowledge, ancient, precise, and capable of reshaping civilization. In France, families once connected to the Order continued to rise quietly within political and academic circles. Their crests bore subtle signs, crosses, stars, and geometric arrangements, that echoed Templar symbolism, though altered slightly to avoid suspicion. These families often maintained private libraries and manuscripts, some of which have never been fully disclosed to the public. When fragments of these collections occasionally surface, they reveal references to lost texts, encrypted journals, and vanished artifacts. Their content is tantalizing enough to suggest that a reservoir of forgotten knowledge may still lie hidden behind locked doors, guarded by descendants who maintain their silence as part of an old and unbroken oath. Meanwhile, certain military and political movements across Europe began to exhibit organizational structures eerily similar to those used by the Templars, cells of members who knew only a portion of the whole, leadership systems obscured to outsiders, and rituals that invoked ancient ideals of discipline and secrecy. Some of these movements disavowed any connection to historical orders, yet their methods and symbols strongly hinted at inherited influences. Whether these similarities reflect direct lineage or unconscious imitation remains a subject of debate, but the resemblance is too consistent to dismiss entirely. Even the financial world, which the Templars helped revolutionize, continued to evolve in ways that reflect their early innovations. Banking systems, credit mechanisms, international transfers, and encrypted record-keeping still follow foundational principles first pioneered by the order. In certain financial institutions, particularly in Switzerland and portions of Italy, the echoes of Templar methodology are unmistakable. The anonymity, the discretion, the layered structures intended to protect assets across borders all mirror what the Templars used to safeguard their wealth and operations. It is as if their economic blueprint became a silent backbone of the modern world. But the most intriguing signs of the Templar legacy are those that appear in places where history claims the order never reached. In South America, legends persist about bearded visitors who arrived long before the Spanish conquest, carrying crosses unlike those of the Catholic Church. In parts of the Middle East, there are tales of foreign knights who protected sacred manuscripts even after the Crusades ended. In remote corners of Asia, there are rumors of encounters with Western travelers who possessed knowledge of star maps and sacred geometry unknown to the region at that time. Whether these stories hint at renegade Templars or coordinated missions remains unknown, but they reinforce the idea that the Order's influence may have extended far beyond the boundaries recorded by history. It is within these dispersed fragments, scattered like constellations across time, that the outline of an invisible structure becomes visible. It is not an organization in the traditional sense, but a legacy carried by ideas, symbols, and practices. The Templars may not have survived as a unified institution, but their principles did, transmitted through guilds, fraternities, families, explorers, scholars, and systems that continued their work long after the last Grandmaster met his fate. Their presence persisted not through banners or armies, but through continuity of knowledge. Some claim this continuity was intentional, that the Templars planned for the survival of their mission through a decentralized network of guardians. Others believe it evolved naturally, as remnants of their teachings drifted into the hands of those who found value in them. Either way, the result is the same. The Templar influence became a silent force shaping the modern world, a hidden lineage that refused to die. The question that now emerges is whether this surviving current is still active, whether there are groups today that understand the full scope of what the Templars protected, or whether the pieces remain scattered, waiting for someone to gather them. History offers no clear answer, only hints, symbols, and coincidences that accumulate into something larger than myth. If the Templars intended to outlive their destruction, then their strategy was more successful than any king or pope could have imagined. Their legacy endures not in the ruins of their fortresses, but in the quiet structures woven into the world itself, unseen yet unmistakably present.